Welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report with our continued coverage of the justice for George Floyd and the trial of Derek Chauvin. I'm Romeo.
Hey there, I'm Brooke.
I'm Demi.
And of course, Melissa is out today.
On today's report, founder of the Racial Justice Network of Minneapolis, Nakima Levy-Armstrong, and Minneapolis community activist Toussaint Morrison is here.
And our legal correspondent, civil rights attorney Sue Ann Robinson is, of course, back to give us an in-depth analysis of Derek Chauvin's trial. And
Dr. Gabriel Crenshaw is here to help us navigate through the mental trauma of the trial, COVID-19, anxiety, and depression. We have all of that and so much more. If you're ready, it's our voice and our truth. So let's get it.
To me, this reeks of conflict of interest.
Do we know if he actually waved a gun? We only hear one side of the story.
This just really did make me feel good that the justice system did what they needed to.
We're going to keep following this story, and we will have the latest for you. Welcome to today's show. Iconic rapper DMX has died at 50 years old. The raspy hip-hop artist is, of course, behind the songs Rough Riders Anthem and How's It Going Down. X's real name is Earl Simmons. He had one of rap's most distinctive voices and an unmatched metaphorical wordplay. A hospital statement attributes his death to catastrophic cardiac arrest. And you'll remember he was rushed to the hospital last week, and he had been on life support the past few days. Here's part of his family's statement. Earl was a warrior who fought till the very end. He loved his family with all his heart, and we cherish the times we spend with him. They went on to say his music inspired countless fans across the world, and his iconic legacy will live on forever. Memorial plans are pending. DMX had 15 children, and that's what I can't stop thinking about. Like, one, and obviously, a man who struggled his whole life, and who dealt with so much his whole life from childhood on. And now, there's a bunch of kids who today they lost their father. And
if I can just say anything, I just feel like the rollout of the news of this was awful. There was one story that got slammed really badly because they started doing a story about how much money he owes to the government and houses he's had over the past. I mean, I just did not like the way they rolled out this news. It just wasn't good. I mean, like Romeo, you were saying before the show, his manager had to come and, do a video to say, hey guys, wait, he's still alive. Like, we shouldn't have even had to worry, right? Like, it just wasn't good.
No, definitely a sad day for the world of hip hop. We'll talk about it more if possible, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, today is day 10 in the trial of Derek Chauvin. Chauvin is charged with second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter in the death of George Floyd. Jurors heard testimony today from a medical examiner and a forensic pathologist. Of course, as always, here to discuss today's proceedings is civil rights attorney Sue Ann Robinson. Sue Ann, welcome back to the show. Thank you. We are so glad to have you every day this week. Thank you throughout the trial. Let's get to it. Veteran medical examiner, forensic pathologist Dr. Lindsay Thomas testified today and reiterated what other doctors and medical examiners have said. Take a look.
Right. So what I observed from all of these videos is this was not a sudden death. Mr. Floyd did not, it's not like the snow shoveling where I told you somebody comes in, collapses and, clutches their chest and falls over. There was nothing sudden about his death. So
she also said in this case, I believe the primary mechanism of death is asphyxia or low oxygen. I'm curious because, we keep hearing medical experts say this. Do you think the prosecution is proving its case?
I think you're on.
I think you're muted, Sue Ann.
Yeah, there we go.
I'm calling Dr. Thomas Big Mama Dr. Thomas.
Okay.
The prosecution called her to preempt Dr. Baker, the Hennepin ME that says that, Chauvin didn't cause George Floyd's death. So they called in Big Mama Dr. Thomas, who basically said, listen, I'm retired from this. I used to do this job. I actually trained this Dr. Baker. So basically, I'm the Osiris of this. Medical examiners are just doing a physical examination. They're not watching videos. They're not looking at other evidence in the case. And all the medical examiner, Dr. Baker did, who I trained, by the way, is do a physical exam. She basically went over the limitations of Dr. Baker's job before Dr. Baker got on the stand. There is nothing more masterful than preempting the negative part of your case with another witness. So that's why he's going to be called Big Mama Dr. Thomas today, because she got on the stand and she basically set the context for what Dr. Baker was going to say, which is he was going to stand by his findings.
Yeah, definitely powerful today. Sue-Ann, pool reporters have reported Judge Peter Cahill questioned a woman juror regarding concerns over outside influences. Now, Cahill asked if attorneys wanted to make any motions, and defense attorney Eric Nelson declined. Prosecutor Steve Schlesser said he would like the record record the note, the woman's demeanor. Now, Cahill noted the woman seemed surprised. What's the significance of this juror questioning and the noting of her demeanor?
Yeah, the juror questioning, would be part of a Schwartz motion. And we've seen that previously. The state actually wanting the juror's demeanor to be noted is to preserve the record. Because as I was talking about yesterday, Nelson is grasping at straws. He's looking for things. He's looking for itty bitty bits. And he feels like his client's in trouble. And when you feel like your client's in trouble, you'll do anything. So he might have, made an allegation or pointed out something that a juror did or said. So, and what happens is when these things are on the record, they give you appellate issues so that if in the event he's found guilty, he can go back in the record and look for issues that he can bring to an appeals court to bring his case back. And so juror issues are fundamental appellate issues for sure. So, I don't know specifically what the juror did, but I can tell you that if no one raised a motion, it's not going to be an issue. But the prosecution did save the record by saying, I just want to note that this juror is surprised. They're not acquiescing to the court's questioning. They're surprised by the questioning.
Thank you so much, Sue-Ann, for joining us yet again. So the New York Times reported that according to the proposed jury instructions, in order for jurors to find Chauvin guilty, his actions need only have a substantial causal factor in Floyd's death, not the only factor in it. So can you break down for our soulmates, for some of us who might not know, the meaning of those instructions?
Yeah, the jury instructions were first proposed back in February, and the devil is really in the jury instructions. I think on my very first time I was on here, we were discussing the jury instructions because so much of what this case will turn out to be is going to be in those jury instructions. As a trial attorney, I usually frame my case with the jury instructions. So the substantial cause element has always been there for third degree. It's a standard jury instruction. So it's nothing new. We're all pointing it out and looking to it because the defense keeps bringing up the fact that George Floyd supposedly had heart disease and George Floyd had a drug problem. But the substantial cause language, it was always there because it's saying that whatever actions the defendant did have to be a substantial cause in the death in order for there to be a third degree murder charge.
Thank you.
The chief medical examiner for Hennepin County, Dr. Andrew Baker, and of course, Dr. Andrew Baker is who conducted the autopsy on George Floyd. Dr. Baker testified today, telling jurors Floyd's breathing did not appear to be impaired by Chauvin's knee on his neck. What were your thoughts about Dr. Baker's testimony?
I need Dr. Baker to have several seats, okay? He's a medical examiner. He is to do physical exams. He's not trained to give his or opine on what the video shows. So honestly, as a prosecutor, today was my first time. I would have objected to him making any comments or opining on anything outside of a physical thing that he observed in George Floyd's autopsy. He needs to have several seats. If you want to stand by your original medical exam, you can. No one is arguing with you about it. You were limited. And just if you're just limited to physical examination, sir, then just say that. Have several seats.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Sue-Ann, we touched on defense attorney Nelson's demeanor yesterday. How do you think he did today on his cross-examination of witnesses?
He had a friend in court today. He was a little more, upbeat today slightly because he had Dr. Baker there. But again, the state has masterfully called Dr. Baker during their case in chief to preempt the defense's argument later. So when they call Dr. Baker to the stand to say, listen, the medical examiner has determined that Chauvin had nothing to do with his death and he was breathing just fine, the jury's going to be like, we heard it all before, friends. We heard it all before.
That made me really nervous. Honestly, I'm not going to lie, Sue-Ann, Dr. Baker's. I feel like we were I'm going to say we, a lot of people on social media for some reason, we were so anticipating Dr. Baker giving this stellar testimony. And for some reason, I don't know. Like you said, Big Mama, she gave me everything that I needed to see today. So I wanted to ask you a question really quickly, because there was a lot of back and forth with Dr. Baker. And so Nelson was really grilling him. And, you were saying, well, if you were very limited, but I also feel like they asked him a lot of questions that he really didn't know the answer to. And he was trying to say, this is outside of my range, but Nelson kept pushing it. So can you kind of like give us when it's, into trial, like what is going on between Nelson and like what's happening with the prosecution? Like, what is everybody thinking when you're literally asking him? He asked him like 5 times questions that he clearly said he didn't know the answer to.
Nelson is doing too much with this witness during the state's case. Nelson should have just waited until his case in chief and ask whatever he wanted to get out of Dr. Baker. To push this issue during the prosecution's case in chief, he basically destroyed the credibility of a witness that he's relying very heavily on later on. Again, Dr. Thomas, Big Mama did a great job.
Yeah.
And then Nelson came in and basically put a nail in Dr. Baker's coffin by having a back and forth with him, by tussling with him and trying to force him to say things. The jury can see that. These are people with life experiences, and they can see what Nelson is doing.
So we're 2 weeks into the trial right now. Obviously, going into next week, there should be more witnesses I've seen for the prosecution. When I talk to people, when I'm at home or if I see them on social media, they really feel like, what can the defense bring to the table to make things different? But yet I always encourage them, we have to be concerned about that. That's why they're coming to trial. Could you tell our soulmates what are some of the things that he can look forward to bringing when it's time for the defense to go ahead and show their side?
I think the defense is going to rely heavily on reasonable doubt. They're going to say, listen, if you're not sure if it was Chauvin's knee or if it was heart disease or if it was an overdose, then you have to find the defendant not guilty. That's really all the defense has. And that's why they're trying to muddy the water and throw things out there, red herrings, whatever they can, because the idea is to obfuscate the jury and cause them to have reasonable doubt as to the prosecution's theory in the case, which is believe your eyes. You can see what caused George Floyd's death.
Yeah, that's true.
I just want to ask one more question. I'm sorry. I've been waiting to talk to you. I always have my questions I want to. So really quick. So with Dr. Baker saying, for example, George Floyd's heart wasn't strong enough, do you feel like that leaves some room for the defense to be like, well, hey, how can we as police officers, how do we know, right? How do we know that we're going to come across someone that you just happen to have a not strong enough heart when, say that this was any of us that didn't have that has a stronger heart, that they would have lived? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, does that leave room for the defense to be like, this is not our fault. He didn't have a strong enough heart. Does that leave that, that gray area open? I was curious about that too.
It does open a door, but where does it lead? Okay. If the defense is really going to argue, hey, George Floyd was in such bad health that Chauvin kneeling on his neck for 9 minutes did nothing, I think that's going to lead down a road that has no fruit for the defense. Their best game plan is to just confuse the jury or try as best they can to throw dirt on the prosecution's arguments, muddy the water, and try to argue reasonable doubt. Because George Floyd was alive, walking around, working, going to the store, and living his life with all these supposed health conditions. So it's insulting to the jury if they're really trying to argue his heart wasn't. No one's heart is big enough or strong enough to withstand someone being on their neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. Not even Chauvin's.
I love that. Sue-Ann, thank you so much. I literally write little notes during the trial. I have to ask this to Sue-Ann. Thank you